This is purely a haunted real estate story, as you can tell from the title. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I know. The woman asked Jerry if he knew a good exorcist. Jerry said, "Who is this again?" "Bonnie Page," she said. "You sold us the house in Caledon, on Dewhurst Road? The haunted house?" "Right," Jerry said. He remembered her now, not because of the house. All of the properties he sold were haunted, but because of her name. She had come to his office a year ago, maybe a year and a half, and when she introduced herself, Jerry had responded, "Oh, like Betty Page," which had made her blush and giggle despite the fact that she looked nothing like the pinup queen. Her husband didn't blush, nor did he giggle. As Jerry recalled, the man looked mad enough to chew nails and shit tacks. Oh well, some guys expected you to flirt a bit with their wives, as if it was part of the house buying dance. Others, like Bonnie's husband, acted like you would besmirch their wife's honor if you paid them even the smallest compliment. Jerry couldn't remember the guy's name, which was a problem for a real estate agent, but he couldn't help it. His brain worked best when he could make a connection that led back to sex. He didn't consider this a problem. He wasn't a sex addict like that guy in Californication. It was just the way his brain worked. He was like Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind, except in his case it was more like a dirty mind. "Mr. Baldwin, are you still there?" "Oh, sorry," Jerry said, holding the phone closer. "My mind was elsewhere." He chuckled. Yeah, he thought, lost in the clouds, somewhere in the pornosphere. "We have a problem," Bonnie said, "a very serious problem." "With the house?" No, the house is fine. It's haunted, but it's fine. It's our daughter." Jerry closed his eyes, thinking back. He pictured a 15-year-old girl in a Hello Kitty shirt and those skinny jeans all the kids were wearing these days. Strictly jailbait, but she had looked older, so Jerry had looked longer. And yes, it was coming back to him now. That was the reason the husband had wanted to pound his ass in the oatmeal. "Your daughter, Jessica," Jerry said. "Jessica?" "That's right," Bonnie said, managing to sound pleased in spite of her general tone of concern. "She just turned 16 last week. She got her first job teaching swimming lessons at the rec center." Jerry nodded to himself. It was all coming back to him now. The house he had sold to the Pages was located at 47 Dewhurst Road in Caledon. Did it have a pool? No, it had something though. A hot tub? He couldn't remember. There were some woods out back with a creek running through them. A nice place out in the country as long as you didn't care that it was haunted. Jerry couldn't remember the specific details. He'd been doing this for a long time, and after a while, all the paranormal nuances started to blend together. "So do you know one?" Bonnie asked. "One what?" Jerry said. "An exorcist for our daughter." "Oh sure," Jerry said. "I could hook you up. Not a problem. We'll have that thing out of her in no time. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it." "Thank you, Mr. Baldwin," Bonnie said, sighing with relief. "I knew we could count on you." Jerry said, "I'll be in touch soon, okay?" Bonnie thanked him and hung up. Jerry turned around in his swivel chair. Possession wasn't common, but it wasn't exactly rare either. It was just another of the many side effects of living in a world next door to a supernatural dimension. Ever since the portals started popping up, all kinds of critters came over from the Blacklands. Some of them annoying, some of them dangerous. Possessors could be one or the other. Jerry wasn't concerned. For every problem the Blacklands had thrown at them, humanity had come up with a solution. Well, mostly. If you had a vampire, you drove a wooden stake through its heart. If you had a werewolf, you shot it with a silver bullet. And if you had a possessor, you got an exorcism. Jerry thought he could probably even do it himself. Demonic possession was like the clogged drain of paranormal problems. Sure, you could call a plumber, but if you had a plunger and a little muscle, you could do the job yourself. Possession was probably a bit more involved than a clogged drain, but really, how hard could it be? Jerry picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Felix," he said, "how'd you like to make $50? Jerry expected, this is sort of an abridged version of the story, so I can read it here. So the story goes actually quite a bit longer, so if it seems a little truncated, that's why. So Jerry expected to see Jessica Page tied to her bed, Linda Blair style, but she wasn't. Maybe I watched too many movies, he thought. The bedroom was empty. The double bed was unmade, the linen half on the floor. There was a bureau, a vanity, and a wardrobe. There had been posters and paintings on the walls, but someone had torn them all down. The posters had been ripped to shreds, while the paintings, one of them a print of Van Gogh's sunflowers, lay scattered on the floor, frames busted and glass facings smashed. "We haven't had a chance to clean up yet," Bonnie said. She sounded embarrassed, as if the state of the room was the real issue at hand. Jerry nodded, looking around. So where is... Then he saw the closed closet door with the straight back chair wedged under the knob, bracing it closed. He pointed. You put her in the closet? Bonnie nodded a little guiltily. She'd been acting strange all week, moody, kind of sulky. She's always been such a good girl, but the things that came out of her mouth lately... She shook her head ruefully. Sounds like a case of teenage-itis, Jerry thought, but didn't say. It wasn't until today that she started getting violent, Bonnie said. I came upstairs to wake her up. I was worried she was going to be late for her job. She works at the rec center on weekends. Did I tell you that? Jerry nodded. She wouldn't get out of her bed. She told me, her face flushed bright red. I don't want to repeat what she said. Her husband Tom came up behind her and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. I couldn't believe my little girl would say such things. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong with her. She swallowed hard. Tom must have heard her because the next thing I knew, he was in the room. She reacted to him like she'd never seen him before. She attacked him. Tom was able to get a hold of her and he tried to pin her down on the bed, but she threw him off like it was nothing. I was standing right here and I saw her do it. I thought she was going to come after me next, but she just laid there like she had fallen asleep or something. Then she let out the most god-awful scream and everything went flying off the walls. Jess came up off the bed, not so much like she jumped, more like something had pushed her from behind and went straight into the bathroom. She pointed at the ensuite. I thought maybe she was going to try to kill herself, cut her wrists or take pills or something. Tom got up and went after her again. I grabbed her from behind, Tom said, picking up the story. It was like holding a bag full of snakes. She was twisting around so much I could barely hold on to her. He ran a hand down his grizzled cheek, making a rasping sound. I dragged her back into the room and stuck her in the closet. I didn't know what else to do. She started banging on the door and I thought for sure she was going to break right through it. There's no lock on the door, so I stuck that chair under it. After a while, she started to calm down. We tried talking to her through the door, but she wouldn't answer, and we didn't want to let her out, just in case. He trailed off, shaking his head. That's when I called you, Bonnie said to Jerry. You have to help us. Please, Mr. Baldwin, you have to help my little girl. You have to. Her voice wavered and dissolved into sobs. Jerry looked from the pages to the closet door and back again. I promise I'll do everything I can to help your daughter, he said. But in order to do that, I need both of you to wait outside. Tom didn't like that and looked like he was going to argue, but then Bonnie put her hand on his arm and his anger seemed to subside under her gentle grip. She led him out of the room and Felix closed the door gently behind him. Jerry wandered over to one of the windows. The bedroom was at the back of the house and the view looked out on an expanse of rolling lawn that extended to dense woods at the rear of the property. It was late October and the trees were stark and skeletal. Can you perform an exorcism through a closed door? Felix asked. I don't know, Jerry said, turning to face the closet. Never done it before. Never seen it done either, but I would assume so. You'd assume so. Well, as long as the possessor can hear me, it should work, right? Felix stared at him. Are you telling me or are you asking me? I'm just curious to hear your opinion. My opinion. Felix pressed his lips together so tightly they almost disappeared. You want my opinion? I think I should have stayed at home. Jerry nodded, not really listening to him. Yeah, I probably should have Googled that before we left. You said you knew what you were doing. I said I have someone who normally does this for me, but since he's not available, I could probably do it in a pinch, and I stand by that. That's not very reassuring, Jer. Felix started pacing back and forth, running his hand through his hair. These people have a serious problem on their hands. What did you think you were going to do? Jerry shrugged. Improvise. Improvise, Felix said. You're going to improvise an exorcism. Sure, people do it all the time. Felix shook his head. No, Jerry, people don't do it all the time. Are you going to help me or what? Felix stopped pacing and appeared to think it over. After a long pause, he said, not, and turned to leave the room. Jerry reached out and grabbed his arm. Felix, come on, don't leave me like this. Felix looked at him with a marked lack of enthusiasm. Jerry didn't mind. He got that look from women all the time when he cruised the bars. At least until he started working on them. That was the reason most guys went home alone. They didn't work hard enough. Jerry may have had his faults, but laziness wasn't one of them. And those who knew him would admit he was a pretty good charmer. Case in point. Let's just get this done, Felix said. Jerry and Felix stood in front of the closet door. So we'll do the exorcism with the door closed, Jerry said. Then we'll check things out, carefully, and if we have to, we'll do it again. Felix shook his head. Whatever. Jerry started doing stretches, rolling the stiffness out of his shoulders, tilting his head from side to side until his neck cracked. When he was done, he slapped his hands together and said, "Okay, let's do this thing." He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a book. Felix glanced at it, then did a double take. He'd expected to see a small leather-bound volume, the kind with onion skin pages and tiny red printing. The book in Jerry's hands was much thinner, with a familiar bright yellow cover and diagonal black stripes. And the words, "Sweet fuck, Jerry, you brought a Cliff Notes version of the Bible?" "Yeah, so? Why didn't you bring a real Bible?" "Well, I don't have one." "Everyone has a Bible." "Well, I don't." "But you had the Cliff Notes lying around." "Well, I bought it." "Why didn't you buy a real Bible?" "Cliff Notes was cheaper." "Oh, Christ." "Ah," Jerry said, "speaking of Christ, did you know?" And he started flipping pages. Felix reached out and slapped the book out of his hands. "Take it easy," Jerry said, reaching down to pick it up. "This book is everything we need. There's a whole section on exorcisms." "But Cliff Notes..." Felix raised his hands like he wanted to throttle Jerry, then let them flop back at his sides. "It's probably going to make things worse." "Hey," Jerry said, "Cliff Notes saved my life in high school, and they're going to save June Page's life today." "Jessica..." "What?" "The possessed girl, the one you're going to save, her name is Jessica." "Right." Felix sighed. "Cliff Notes." "The book doesn't matter," Jerry said. "It's still the Bible, even if it's printed on grocery bags. It's the words that count." Felix turned to face the closet door. "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" Jerry flipped a few pages to a section titled "The Rite of Exorcism." Below this it said, "For the original Latin, turn to page 86. For exorcism practices in other countries, turn to page 89. For trivia about the film The Exorcist, turn to page 126. Jerry took a deep breath. "Okay," he muttered, "let's evict some demons." He began to read from the book. When he was finished, Jerry closed the book and slapped it against his thigh. "There we go," he said, "all done." Felix gave him a skeptical look. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," Jerry said. "I've seen Father Benenwadi do this 100 times. 100 times? Well, at least a dozen. Were any of those times through a closed door? Why are you so hung up on this door thing? You think the power of exorcism can't penetrate a piece of wood?" "Possibly," Felix said, "assuming, of course, that you even possess the power of exorcism." "Is that a joke?" Jerry asked. "What? Possess the power of exorcism? Were you making a pun?" "No, I just think it takes more than reading from a book to expel a possessor. I keep telling you, Felix, it's all about belief. It's belief that lets a possessor in, and it's belief that kicks them out. Save me the lesson, Jer. I just want to know if this particular possessor is gone." Jerry stepped forward and pulled the chair away from the closet door. "Let's find out." Jerry said, "After you." Felix looked at him. "After me what?" Jerry gestured. "Open the door." "You open the door, you're the exorcist." "Yes, and you're my assistant, so assist me by opening the door." "Well, what are you afraid of?" Felix said. "Afraid?" Jerry said. "I'm not afraid of anything." "Then why don't you open the door?" "You want me to open the door? Fine, I'll open the damn door." Jerry reached out and turned the knob, but before he could pull it open, the door came flying out toward him. It happened so fast he didn't have time to react, and the edge of the door clipped his shoulder and sent him spinning to the ground. The door struck the wall and rebounded back. It would have closed again, but a long, slim arm snaked out and stopped it. Jessica Page may have been pretty at one time, but she wasn't now. Her face had a bloated look, like she'd had an allergic reaction to something. Bathing, maybe, Jerry thought, wrinkling his nose at the stink that rolled off her. The funk was so strong he half expected to see a cloud hanging around her, like Pigpen in the Peanuts comics. Her arms and legs were rail thin, but her stomach was as bloated as her face and pushed out the front of her soiled nightgown. Her hair, chestnut brown like her mother's, hung in dark, greasy tangles around a face that was ashen and etched with blue veins. Her mouth hung open, lips dry and cracked. A glistening strand of saliva dangling off the edge of her stubby chin. Her eyes were half-lidded and filmed over as if with cataracts. Felix stared, looking as slack and expressionless as the girl standing before him. Jerry yelled, "Close the fucking door!" Felix came out of his daze and reached for the door, managed to grab the edge of it, then Jessica Page's arm snapped out and delivered an open-handed blow to his chest that sent him flying backward across the room. He struck the far wall and crumpled to the floor. 2 feet to the left and he would have gone through the window. Jerry muttered, "Fuck me," and Jessica's head snapped around with a loud cracking sound. She took a stiff step toward him and her leg made the same brutal bone-snapping crack. Jerry reached into his jacket pocket and took out the Cliff Notes Bible. He started to open it, then said, "Aw, hell," and whipped it overhand. The book struck Jessica square in the face. It might have been a gust of fresh summer wind for all the effect it had. She continued to advance on him, making those jerking, stomping steps like a marionette controlled by a puppeteer with a heavy hand, every movement punctuated by that sharp cracking sound, as if the entity's presence in the girl's body was an affront to her entire physiology. When she reached Jerry, she crouched down, her knees popping like rifle shots, and raised a hand in front of his face. Her fingers flexed, knuckles crackling, and Jerry thought she meant to gouge out his eyes. That might have been the original plan, but Jessica, or the thing controlling her body, sensed movement and turned her head and looked off across the room. Jerry hesitated, then turned his own head and followed the direction of her gaze. She was looking at the ensuite. Then, with another double pop of cracking kneecaps, she straightened up and started off in a stiff-legged walk. Jerry scooted back on his butt, moving around the double bed until he made it over to where Felix lay slumped on his side. He was groaning something Jerry couldn't quite make out. "What's that, buddy?" "I said I fucking hate you." Felix touched the back of his head and winced. "Now I know what a bug feels like when it hits a windshield." There was a loud clapping sound as Jessica threw the ensuite door closed behind her. Jerry got up, dashed over to the door and tried the knob. Locked. Felix climbed unsteadily to his feet and came over. "This is what her parents said she did last time." "They thought she was going to kill herself," Jerry said. He banged on the door. "Jessica, don't do it. You have every reason to live." "It's not Jessica, you moron." Felix took a step back from the door. "Get out of the way." They stood for a moment, heads cocked toward the door, listening. There was silence from the other side. Then a low metallic squeak, followed by the loud gushing sound of pouring water. "She's running a bath," Felix said. "She could use one," Jerry said. Felix reached into his pocket and took out a Swiss Army knife. At least Jerry thought that's what it was. Looking closer, he saw that the symbol on the side wasn't the white cross logo of the Swiss Army, but rather the badge of the RCMP. "What's that?" Jerry asked. "Something a friend made me," Felix said simply. He opened one of the tools on the knife, then slid another out of the red plastic housing. Jerry stared with something like awe. "Is that a pick? And a tension wrench?" His eyes widened. "Shit, where did you get a Swiss Army knife with lock-picking tools?" "That's classified," Felix said. He bent down to work on the lock. "You need to hurry," Jerry urged him. "No problem," Felix said. "Old house, old locks. I'll have this open in a jiff." A moment later, the lock snicked back. Jerry turned the knob and pushed the door open. They went in. That's a good spot to end it.